Okay, we'll get started. Hello and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar for the STD PhD Years 4 and 5 DIS Workforce Development Supplement application. We will jump right in, and we should have plenty of time for questions at the end, but at any time you can raise your hand and ask a question. Today's webinar is for current recipients of STD PhD. I think all lines are actually muted, and you'll need to raise your hand to get unmuted and ask a question. You can also enter questions via the Q&A box, and please put them in the Q&A box rather than the chat. It's easier for us to track it in the Q&A box. We are recording the webinar, and slides and recording will be distributed after the webinar, although I have to tell you that it does take us a little while to get clearance on the recording. So we'll be sending the slides, and then the recording will come a little bit later. So very simply, we're just going to go over the application components and procedures. The guidance was released on Tuesday. We'll go through a couple of changes, talk very briefly about the work plan and the budget, and go over the submission procedure, and then we'll have time for questions. So changes in the guidance. Probably the biggest change is that limits on diagnostics, medications, and clinical care have changed, and up to a combined 25% of the funds can be used to cover diagnostics, medications, and clinical services. So that's not separately, that's all combined, and there's not individual limits on these, but in total, they can be up to 25% of the funds. We also added a few specific examples of allowable expenditures. These have to do with electronic health records or evaluation questions. These are things that were already allowed, but we have added some more specificity to help promote ideas of allowable expenditures. Talking about the work plan, just please don't forget to select your project area as you're filling out your work plan. Update the staffing plan, and record your activities for work plan tabs 1 through 5, just like you've done in the past. Of course, this budget period is different. It's from February 1st of 2024 through March 31st of 2026, but that shouldn't really impact too much the activities that you've proposed. So I think that should be pretty straightforward and similar to past submissions. Now, the budget narrative. So the funding amounts are included in the guidance. So you will need to budget for that entire period of February 1st of 2024 through March 31st of 2026. And I realize that is a 26-month period. We are taking advantage of this opportunity to shift our budget years to give us a little more breathing room. The calendar year budget periods were not administratively kind to us. So you will need to stretch the funds. There are not additional funds to cover those 2 months, so the funds will need to be stretched, but there's also a lot of unexpended funds for most of y'all that could be used to supplement and stretch the funds. So don't anticipate that being a huge problem, but as always, you can talk to your project officer about any complications you're having. On your 424A, please label it as DIS Workforce Supplement Year 4 to 5. You can see in the bold there. That really helps us out as we're processing the administrative actions. We can quickly see what you've submitted. There is an original Q&A document, and everything but the limits on clinical care, medications, and diagnostics are the same. Please provide hiring timelines for your vacant positions. This is what we end up making action items out of the most, and it's really easily fixable, prorate based on the timeline for the position. I see a question. Yeah, January 2024 is also where you'll need to stretch your budget, and that will be the current budget that you'll need to stretch. And you can also use unexpended funds if you need to cover those already approved expenditures. Yeah, and the 1 month extension was only for the base. That's correct. So you'll use your current DIS workforce budget to cover that 1 month of January 2024, and then you'll have this new award for the next 26 months following. So submission. First of all, unfortunately, we cannot accommodate extension requests on this deadline. The deadline is June 30th, and I realize that is a very quick turnaround. We are trying to move this very quickly to avoid complications from the end of fiscal year deadlines that we have, and really are concerned that it could put the awards at risk if we delay at all at this point. So talk with your grants management specialist and your project officer, but we really can't accommodate extensions right now. So I understand that's going to be a challenge, but it is what it is, and we're trying to work with it. I hope you can. You'll submit as a supplement amendment, and you can see from the grants list page, you select new, supplement, create amendment. I know grant solutions can be a little tricky, but those are the steps. That takes you to the application control checklist, and you'll complete online versions of the 424 and the 424A. We'll need a cover letter signed by the PI and the authorizing official, your budget narrative, and your work plan. And please only submit for the DIS workforce supplement. Do not submit STD Peached core budgets or work plans. That's not necessary at this time, and renewal for that will be coming out before too long with a fall due date. I'm going to ask the anonymous attendee to please identify themselves, and we will answer your question. It is time for answering questions. So if you want to raise your hand and be unmuted, that would be great. And we do believe this is the way to best protect the funding. Tahira Green.
Yes. You said we're submitting a work plan and budget by June 30th, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And the work plan template and the work plan template was released with the guidance.
Yep. Gotcha. Thank you.
Elizabeth Kingdon.
Hello, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Excellent. So I've been looking at the template a little bit and would like to clarify a date. So on one of the tabs, it's talking about the projected new positions to be filled by, and then it's got a date. And the staffing tab says 12/31/26. And the staffing plan guidance says both 1/31/26 and January 21st, 26.
Okay, well, those should be March 31st of 2026.
Okay, so it is the end of
It
the
is the end of the
Okay.
budget period. Yes, by the
Okay.
end of the budget period.
March 31st, 2026. Should we just manually make the change in the template for that?
You can just submit the template as is, and we will.
You'll know. Okay,
We'll know. Yeah.
thank you.
Alexia McGonigal.
Hi there.
Hi.
This is Alexia McGonigal from California. My question in the chat is, with the recent news that the White House has reached a deal potentially rescinding some of the American Rescue Plan Act funding, is the early grant application time period kind of an effort to award the next 2 years of funding prior to any of the DIS workforce supplemental funding being rescinded? And what can we expect around that?
Well, it's certainly coincidental, isn't it? It is. It may protect the funds to have them already awarded. Kathleen Roosevelt.
Hi, thank you so much for this. I just wanted to ask it follow up, I guess, on the previous question. So when you say it may protect the funds to have them already awarded, does this make them obligated funds? I think there's, I was just wondering about that sort of terminology that we're reading about.
Yeah, it would be, from our perspective, they would be obligated.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Casey Redden.
Yes, I am Casey Redden. I am from South Dakota, and I was curious if there was guidance instructing us on how to cover that January 24 portion of the STI supplement. We did do that 1 month extension, but that was only for the base. And so I was curious what the budget will cover for that STI supplement on the January 2024.
Yeah, that we suggest that you use unexpended funds, which you can use to cover any already approved expenditures, budgeted items. So anything that's already in an approved budget, you can use to extend those, use those unspent funds.
Okay, thank you.
Elizabeth, I see your question in the chat, and if you need something specific in writing, you should reach out to your grants management specialist, but we don't usually do that. Expanded authority, the language is in the NOA and should be sufficient to cover the use of expanded authority. Okay, Elizabeth, I would suggest that you reach out to the grants management specialist and project officer, and maybe we can figure something out. And I see John Peebles has his hand up. I'm in trouble unmuting. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering if there's any additional information or updates on the outlook for continued DIS workforce funding beyond 3/31/26.
There's no update. I don't have any update at all.
Okay.
About continuation of these funds or this kind of funding.
Thanks.
I'm catching a couple of Cheryl's question. Will the STD Peached base funding be extended to March 31st, 2026 as well? That is our intention. So yes. And Melissa, we plan to distribute the recording. It does take us a little while to get it through clearance, so we'll be sharing the slide set and then the recording sometime after that. Sorry, I'm catching up with some of these questions in the Q&A box. Do we anticipate a no cost extension beyond 326? At this time, I have no expectation of that. I do not anticipate that. This question is from an anonymous attendee, which we really like you to identify yourselves, but did I understand correctly that 25% of funds can now be used for clinical services instead of previously 10%? So let me unpack that for a little bit, because clinical services previously for the DIS workforce supplement were not allowed to be spent on clinical services. There was a 10% cap on diagnostics and a 3% cap on medications. Now, clinical services are allowed. They should in some way enhance disease intervention specialist work. But we have heard from y'all that DIS identifies someone and then can't find somewhere for them to get treated. And so, so we've made adjustments for that. But up to 25% of the funds can be used for diagnostics, medications, and clinical services. For the January 2024 funding, are we going to have to submit a budget as we did for the other Peach no cost extension? No, we will not be awarding additional funds for that month under the DIS workforce supplement. So as my previous question, a previous question asked how to cover that, and we suggest using unexpended funds to cover that. Stephanie Cohen asks, can the 26-month budget include both the amount we were notified of in the NOA and unspent funds from years 1 through 3, or should the 26-month budget only include the amount in the NOA? In the guidance, you should be budgeting for the amount that's in the guidance and do not add unexpended funds to that. You'll have to make adjustments after the fact to cover those with unspent funds. But for this exercise, we are going to need you to budget only the amount that is in the guidance for the 26-month period. Jason Bell just asked to repeat your response to will the STD Peach-based funding be extended to March 31st as well. That is our intention. And you know, the NOA is for both, because Peach is a supplement to, or DIS workforce is a supplement to the Peach base. So by extending this, we will be extending the Peach base as well. Neva Hammond asked, just to clarify, you don't anticipate the DIS workforce funding to go beyond 3/31/2026. So with the expanded authority funds, I don't understand your question in the chat, Neva. With the expanded expanded authority would last through the same time period as the award itself, because we don't anticipate extending beyond 3/31/2026. Stephanie Cohen asks, will there be an option for a no cost extension after 3/31/26? That is not in the plans right now. But it's also not impossible, but nothing for that is planned right now. Joshua Christianello asks, do we anticipate changes in the progress reporting requirements? No, those I think we're going to keep the same and keep them on the same periodicity. So they may be slightly off from the budget years, but makes more sense to keep reporting semi-annually. Michelle Carlson asked, so we can only use 25% of the NOA amount for medications testing. Will all carryover funds still be limited to 10%? No, the 25% guidance will supersede the 10%. So if you have an approved budget that goes over the 10%, then you can use funds to support that. Megan Evans asks, if STD Peached and DIS Workforce are both through 3/31/26, will the new grant be released to start with a 4/1/26 start date? Yes, that's correct. Kara Morello asks when the recording will be available. And I have to tell you that I don't know. It may be a couple weeks, but we'll be getting it as quickly as we can. Brandon Kufok writes, I'm sorry, I missed the answer about submitting a budget for January 2024 for the DIS supplement as we did for the based Peach grant. Yeah, you will not be submitting a budget for January 2024 for the DIS workforce supplement. We are not awarding additional funds to cover that month, and you'll need to use expanded authority to cover that month or unexpended funds. Alexia McGonigal asks, after March 31st, 2026, will there be a new NOFO that combines Peached and DIS workforce type activities with similar funding levels? The new NOFO is under development now, and may include similar or new activities. And I can't speak to the funding levels yet. Roger Fallis asks, can you share the PowerPoint presentation with us prior to the recording being released? Yes, we will send out the slides. We will send out the slides before the recording. Yes, the slides will be available sooner, Cassandra. Megan Evans writes, between now and the 4/1/26 release of the new grant, does CDC anticipate going back to level Peached funding sans the DIS workforce funds? I know it's hard to predict the future. It is, but do you anticipate only awarding close to the STD Peached amounts? What I will say is that STD Peached funding has been relatively stable for a very long time. The DIS workforce funds are supplemental funds that we have no real expectation of continuing after 3/31/26. Michelle Carlson asks, I couldn't find the budget period for the upcoming clinical infrastructure grant. Could you share that? I will make a note of that. We will have to get back to you. I am not up on those dates, but Amanda Reich asks, hi, Jeff, does level funding mean level funding or level funding adjusted for inflation? I'm not sure what you're referring to, but the DIS workforce funds are set 200 million per year, roughly, and of course we've extended the time frame on that a little bit, but we don't have additional funds. STD Peached has remained fairly level, though we've had slight increases here and there. There's no explicit adjustment for inflation. It's based on how much Congress appropriates for us. So I can't say whether level funding will mean that it's totally flat or that it's at all adjusted. Right. Question and answer box is going quiet again. We will give it a couple minutes. You can stare at my face for a little bit longer. And we'll see if we get any more questions. Every time I mention that it's quiet, I get a couple more questions. So let's see if we've run out of questions for now. Hey, if there are no further comments or questions, then we will wrap up. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for your patience and your hard work. And I realize this is a very short turnaround and causes problems for some of your approval processes. And I hope you're able to work those out and we can move this as quickly as we need to. And again, I appreciate you very much. So thank you, everyone.